My name is Wendy Thomas. I'm 29 years old. I'm a registered nurse. Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery, my father said to the doctor while I lay in a coma, tubes in my throat, heart barely beating. He said it the way you'd cancel a subscription. No hesitation, no trembling voice. He signed the Do Not Resuscitate order at 11:18 on a Tuesday night. Not because the doctors told him I was beyond saving, but because the billing department told him the number. That was all it took. A number. And when I woke up 3 weeks later, bruised, broken, barely able to lift my own head, I discovered that the DNR wasn't even the worst thing he'd done while I was unconscious. What I did in the next 24 hours didn't just change my life. It collapsed his, and he never saw it coming. Because he forgot one thing about me. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Now, let me take you back 7 months earlier, to the day my grandmother died and everything started to unravel. I was born with a hole in my heart, a ventricular septal defect. That's what the cardiologist called it. I was 4 years old when they opened my chest. The surgery took 11 hours. The bill took my parents 20 years to forget. Or rather, it took my mother 20 years to forget. My father never did. You know how much you cost this family, Wendy? I was 8 the first time he said it. I'd asked for new sneakers. Mine had a crack along the sole and my socks got wet every time it rained. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of medical bills. He didn't look up. $214,000. That's what you cost. I didn't get the sneakers. By the time I was 12, I'd stopped asking for anything. By 15, I was babysitting 3 houses on our block to pay for my own school supplies. By 18, I signed my first student loan, alone, while my older sister Meredith packed for the state university my parents were funding in full. Nobody questioned it. Meredith got a car at 16. I rode the bus. Meredith got her tuition paid. I got a repayment plan. Meredith got birthday dinners at restaurants. I got cake from a box and a card signed by my mother only. And I accepted all of it. That's the part that's hardest to explain. I wasn't angry. I genuinely believed I owed them. My father had repeated it so many times, you cost this family everything, that the debt felt as real as the scar on my chest. I carried it the way I carried my nurse's badge, every single day, without thinking. The only person who never mentioned that debt was my grandmother, Lillian. Lillian Price lived alone in a small brick house on Elm Street in Norristown, Pennsylvania. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. She'd lived there for 41 years, raised my mother there, buried my grandfather from there, and kept the garden alive through every winter since. I started visiting her every Saturday when I was 23, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in student debt. I'd drive 40 minutes each way, bring her groceries, check her blood pressure, sit on that porch swing and listen to her talk about nothing and everything. She never once said, "You owe me." She said things like, "Tell me about your week, sweetheart," and, "Did you eat today?" And once, near the end, her hands shaking, her voice barely above a whisper, she said something I didn't understand. "I've taken care of things for you, Wendy. When the time comes, a man named Kessler will find you." I smiled and squeezed her hand. I thought she was confused. She got like that sometimes, or so I believed. She was 84. I assumed it was the medication talking. My father hated that I visited her. "You're wasting gas," he'd say. "She doesn't even remember your name." That was a lie. Lillian was sharp until her last breath. She remembered everything, including things my father wished she'd forget. She died on a Thursday in March, quietly, in her sleep, in that brick house on Elm Street. My father organized the funeral, small, quick. He didn't let me read a eulogy. "Keep it short," he said at the door of the funeral home. "We're not making a spectacle." I stood in the back row and said goodbye in silence. Lillian had said Kessler would find me. I didn't know who Kessler was. Not yet. It would take a coma, a signed death order, and 4 days in a hospital bed before that name meant anything at all. 3 months after Lillian's funeral, I was driving home from a 12-hour overnight shift at the hospital. It was 4:17 in the morning. Route 202, light rain. I remember the clock on my dashboard because I was calculating how many hours of sleep I could get before my next shift. 6, if I skipped breakfast. 5, if I showered. I never made that calculation again. The pickup truck ran the red light doing 50. It hit the driver's side of my car so hard, the frame folded inward like paper. I don't remember the sound. I don't remember the glass. I'm told I was conscious for about 90 seconds after impact, long enough for the paramedic to hear me say my name. Then nothing. Traumatic brain swelling, 4 broken ribs, internal hemorrhaging. The ER team at St. Catherine's, my own hospital, the place where I clocked in and out 5 days a week, opened me up within the hour. But the bleeding wouldn't stop. They needed a second surgery, a specialist, more time in the OR, and someone had to authorize it. I had no husband, no children. The emergency contact on my hospital file was the same name that had been there since I was 18, because my father had insisted on it. Gerald Thomas, next of kin. They called him at 10:30 that night. He arrived at 10:47. I know the exact time because the front desk logged it. He didn't go to my room first. He didn't ask the nurse how I was doing. He didn't ask if I was in pain or if I was afraid or if I had woken up even once. He walked straight to the billing department, and he asked one question: how much is this going to cost? I learned what happened next from a woman named Patricia Walsh. Everyone at St. Catherine's called her Pat. She was our head nurse, 28 years on the floor, a voice like gravel, and a memory that missed nothing. Pat was at the nurse's station when my father walked out of billing and found Dr. Richard Hale, the surgeon managing my case. She heard every word. "The second surgery," my father said. "What's the estimate?" Dr. Hale told him. 180 to 240, depending on complications. Insurance would cover part of it, but there'd be significant out-of-pocket, especially because my father was co-signer on some of my old medical accounts. He'd insisted on that when I was 18. I thought it was a kindness. It was a leash. My father didn't blink. "She doesn't have a healthcare proxy," he said. "I'm her father. I'm the decision-maker here." Dr. Hale nodded carefully. "That's protocol when no proxy is on file. Next of kin steps in." And then my father said it. "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery." Pat told me later that Dr. Hale didn't respond immediately. He stared at my father for a long time. My father didn't look away. "She's been a financial drain her whole life," my father said. "Don't resuscitate." He signed the DNR form. His hand was steady, no hesitation. He put the pen down, asked if there was anything else he needed to sign, and walked toward the elevator. He didn't visit my room. He didn't look through the glass. He didn't say goodbye. Pat stood behind the station counter, gripping the edge with both hands. She told me her knuckles were white. She told me she wanted to scream. She didn't scream. She did something better. She sat down and opened my employee file. Every nurse at St. Catherine's fills out an emergency packet during onboarding: contact information, insurance, allergies, and a healthcare proxy designation. Most people skip that last section. I didn't. 3 years before that night, I had signed my healthcare proxy over to Deborah Owens. Deborah was my best friend from nursing school. She lived 45 minutes away in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. She was listed clearly on my employee file: name, phone number, relationship. Pat found it in under 2 minutes. She called Deborah at 11:14 p.m. Deborah picked up on the second ring. Pat told her what had happened: the accident, the coma, the surgery that needed authorization, and a father who had just signed an order to let his daughter die. Deborah didn't ask questions. She said, "I'm leaving now." She drove 90 minutes through rain. She walked into St. Catherine's at 12:51 a.m. with her driver's license, a copy of the proxy form she'd kept in her filing cabinet, and hands that were still shaking. She revoked the DNR. She authorized the surgery. Dr. Hale scrubbed in within the hour. My father was already home by then, asleep. He had no idea the DNR had been overturned. As far as he knew, the machines would stop, and the hospital would call him in the morning with the news. Pat didn't call him. Neither did Deborah. Neither did anyone. Instead, Pat did one more thing before her shift ended. She opened an internal incident report, the kind that gets filed when a staff member witnesses a protocol concern. She documented every word my father had said, the timestamps, the DNR signature, and the fact that he had falsely claimed I had no healthcare proxy. She filed it, locked her computer, and sat in the break room alone for 20 minutes. Gerald Thomas went home that night believing his daughter would be dead by morning. He slept soundly. And the next day, he made his second mistake, the one that would cost him everything he owned. My father woke up the next morning expecting a phone call from the hospital. A time of death. Maybe a form to sign. He'd already rehearsed what he'd tell people. I could picture it, the catch in his voice, the hand over his heart. We lost her. The injuries were just too severe. But the call didn't come, not because anyone told him I was alive. It simply didn't come. And rather than call the hospital himself, rather than drive down and check on his youngest daughter, Gerald Thomas spent that Wednesday morning doing something else entirely. He went to steal my house. Here's what I didn't know at the time, what I wouldn't learn until weeks later. My grandmother Lillian had already transferred the Norristown house into my name before she died. The deed was handled through her personal attorney. It was clean, legal, filed with the county, and my father had no idea it existed. What he did know was that Lillian was gone, the house was sitting empty, and someone was going to claim it, so he made sure that someone was him. He had a power of attorney document. My signature was on it. Except I had never signed it. He'd traced my handwriting from old medical consent forms, the ones he'd made me sign when I was barely 18 and didn't know any better. He brought the forged POA to a notary he knew, a man named Carl who owed him a favor and didn't ask questions. Carl stamped it. Gerald filed the deed transfer at the county recorder's office that afternoon. By Thursday, the house was in his name. By Friday, he'd walked into a bank and taken out a mortgage against it. $280,000. Cash in hand within a week. The money didn't go toward my medical bills. It didn't go into a savings account. It went to pay off gambling debts. Debts that nobody in our family, in our church, in our neighborhood knew existed. He didn't know the house was already in my name. He didn't know how it got there. And he certainly didn't know about the man my grandmother had called Kessler. But here's the thing about forged signatures. They hold up only as long as nobody looks closely. And somebody was about to look very, very closely. I opened my eyes on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the accident. The light was blue-white, the kind that only exists in hospitals. Too bright, too flat, no warmth in it. I knew that light. I'd worked under it for 6 years, but I'd never been on this side of it before. My throat was raw. The breathing tube had been removed, but I could still feel where it had been, like a bruise inside my chest. My ribs ached when I inhaled. My left arm was in a soft cast. Everything was heavy. Even blinking took effort. The first face I saw was Pat's. Not my father's, not my sister's. Pat. She was standing by the window with her arms crossed, watching my monitors. When she saw my eyes open, she didn't gasp or rush over. She pulled a chair to my bedside and sat down. She took my hand. Her grip was firm and warm. "You're safe," she said. "I need to tell you some things. Not now, when you're ready." I tried to speak. My voice came out cracked, barely a whisper. "How long?" 3 weeks. Surgery went well. You're going to be fine." I closed my eyes again. Not because I was tired, because I was trying to remember how I'd ended up here. The truck, the red light, the sound of... The door opened. My father walked in at 2:17 that afternoon. The nurses logged it. I know because I checked later. He stood in the doorway for a moment. I watched his face carefully. There was something there, a flicker, half a second, before his expression rearranged itself into something softer, something practiced. I've read 1,000 faces in the ICU. Fear of losing someone looks different from fear of being caught. He rushed to my bedside. He grabbed my hand. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Oh, sweetheart, we were so scared. Thank God you're okay." I looked at him, at the tears, at the trembling lip. "Hi, Dad," I said. Meredith sent flowers that evening. A generic bouquet from an online florist. She didn't come. 2 days later, I could sit up on my own. Pat waited until the afternoon shift change, when the hallway was quiet and the door could stay closed without anyone asking why. She pulled the same chair to my bed. She didn't sit down right away. She stood there for a moment, looking at me like she was trying to decide where to begin. "Just say it, Pat." She sat. "The night of your accident, your father came to the hospital." "I know. He told me he was here every day." "He wasn't. He came once. That night, he spoke to Dr. Hale. He asked about the cost of your surgery." I didn't interrupt. I kept my hands still on the blanket. "He told Dr. Hale you had no healthcare proxy. He said he was the sole decision maker, and then he signed a Do Not Resuscitate order." The room was quiet. The monitor beeped. I counted 3 beeps before I spoke. "He signed a DNR." "Yes." "On me?" "Yes." "What did he say, exactly?" Pat looked at me steady. "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because I finally had the words for something I'd felt my entire life, the shape of a truth I'd always known but never heard spoken aloud. I was a line item, a cost, a number on a bill that never stopped growing. I opened my eyes. "How am I alive?" "I found your proxy in your employee file, Deborah Owens. I called her. She drove here in the middle of the night and authorized the surgery." "Is it on record, what he did?" "Incident report, filed and time-stamped, his exact words." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I looked at Pat. "Get me my phone." She reached into the drawer of my bedside table and handed it to me. I powered it on. 32 missed calls from my father. 11 from Meredith. I scrolled past all of them. I opened my contacts and found a name I hadn't called in months. A name my grandmother had given me, Kessler. The phone rang twice. "This is Donald Kessler." The voice was calm, measured. The kind of voice that has read 10,000 documents and is surprised by none of them. "Mr. Kessler, my name is Wendy Thomas. I think my grandmother—" "Miss Thomas." He cut me off gently. "I've been trying to reach you for 4 months." I gripped the phone tighter. My ribs protested. I didn't care. He explained. Lillian Price had come to his office 2 years before she died. She sat across from his desk, sharp-eyed and clear-headed, and told him she wanted to make a will. Not through the family attorney, not through anyone her son-in-law might know, through him, privately, notarized by his own staff, sealed. The will was simple. The house on Elm Street in Norristown, to Wendy Marie Thomas. Solely. A trust account containing $85,000. To Wendy Marie Thomas. Solely. No other names. No conditions. "It was probated 5 months ago," Kessler said. "The court confirmed it. The deed transfer to your name was filed and recorded. I sent certified letters to your address. They were returned. I called your listed phone number. Someone told me you'd moved out of state and didn't want to be contacted." My father. That was my father's voice on the line, telling Kessler I was gone. "I'm in the hospital, Mr. Kessler. I was in a car accident. I've been in a coma for 3 weeks. A pause. "I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Thomas." "The house," I said. "Is it still in my name?" A longer pause. "Let me pull the current deed records. I'll call you back within the hour." I hung up and set the phone on my chest. Pat was still in the room, standing by the door. "Your grandmother told me you'd call," Kessler had said before we hung up. She said, "Wendy always comes through, just give her time." 1 hour. That's all it took for Donald Kessler to discover what my father had done, and for my plan to begin. The phone rang 53 minutes later. Kessler's voice was different now, still measured, but there was an edge beneath it, the controlled tension of a man who has just read something he wasn't expecting. "Miss Thomas, the deed to your grandmother's property was transferred out of your name 3 weeks ago." I stared at the IV drip on my arm, counted the drops. 1, 2, 3. "Transferred to whom?" "Gerald Thomas, your father, using a power of attorney." "I never signed a power of attorney, Mr. Kessler." "I know you didn't, because I have the original deed transfer from probate, your name, notarized by my office. No POA was ever authorized by you or recorded through my firm." "So it's forged." "That is my assessment, yes. And there's more. I ran a lien search on the property. A mortgage was recorded against it 6 days ago. $280,000. The number sat in the room like a third person. I could hear Kessler breathing on the other end, waiting. He leveraged the house, I said. He did. I reached for the pen on my bedside table. My hand wasn't shaking. I don't know why. Maybe because none of this was surprising. Maybe because I'd spent 29 years learning exactly who my father was, and this was simply the final lesson. I wrote down every number Kessler gave me. The mortgage amount, the recording date, the lien holder, the notary's stamp number. Miss Thomas, do you want to press charges? Not yet. I want to see how deep this goes first. There's one more thing, Kessler said. Your grandmother left you a letter, sealed. She asked me to deliver it to you in person, only to you. I set the pen down. When can you come to the hospital? Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I'll be here. I hung up, wrote the last number down. Then I turned to Pat, who had been standing silently by the window the entire time. Pat, I said, what time did my father sign the DNR? 11:18 p.m. I wrote that down too. Gerald Thomas visited his daughter the next afternoon with a bouquet of yellow roses and a Tupperware of banana bread that Meredith had baked. He set both on the table beside my bed, kissed my forehead, and sat down with the sigh of a man carrying an enormous burden. He was good at this. The performance. I'd watched it my entire life, at parent-teacher conferences, at church potlucks, at holiday dinners. The weary father, the silent provider, the man who sacrificed everything and never complained. The doctors say you'll be out in a week, he said, squeezing my hand. We'll take care of everything. Thank you, Dad. Meredith came this time, first visit since the accident. She stood at the foot of my bed with her phone in her hand and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. We were so worried, she said. I couldn't sleep for weeks. I looked at her. She looked at the window. My father leaned forward, his voice low and warm. The voice he used when he wanted you to feel held. Don't worry about the medical bills, sweetheart. We'll figure it out as a family. That's what families do. That's what families do. The man who signed my death order was sitting at my bedside, holding my hand, telling me about family. As a family, I repeated. I squeezed his hand back. I smiled. He smiled too, satisfied. He thought the script was working. They stayed for 40 minutes. Gerald talked about the weather, the Phillies, a leak he'd fixed for a client on Saturday. Meredith checked her phone 11 times. Then they left. I watched the door close behind them. I sat still for 10 seconds. The room was silent. Then I picked up my phone and called Kessler. Mr. Kessler, when can you come? Bring the letter. Donald Kessler arrived at 9 the next morning. He was shorter than I'd imagined. A quiet man in a gray suit, silver-rimmed glasses, a leather briefcase that had seen decades of use. He shook my hand gently, mindful of the IV line, and pulled a chair beside my bed. Your grandmother spoke about you often, he said. Every meeting, she mentioned you. He opened the briefcase. Inside was a manila envelope, sealed, Lillian's handwriting on the front. Just my name, Wendy. I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. Her handwriting was thin but steady. She had written this while she could still hold a pen. Wendy, I know your father will try to take everything. He already has over the years. My pension, my savings, things I never told you because I didn't want to break the family apart. That was my mistake. Don't make it yours. The house is yours. The money is yours. Mr. Kessler has all the paperwork. Don't let anyone take what's yours, not even your father. Especially your father. You are stronger than me, sweetheart. You always have been. I'm sorry I didn't say this while I could still hold your hand. I cried. For the first time since I'd woken up, since the accident, since Pat's words, since every cold revelation that had stacked on top of the last like bricks. I cried. Not because I was weak, because my grandmother had seen me. All of me. And she had planned for this moment the way she planned everything. Quietly, carefully, with love that didn't need applause. Kessler waited. He set a thick folder on the blanket beside me when I was ready. The original will, the probate records, the deed transfer in my name, and the lien search showing my father's mortgage. "You have everything you need," he said. "What do you want to do?" I wiped my face, sat up straighter, my ribs screamed, I didn't care. "I want to do this right. I want to do this publicly, and I want it done before Sunday." Kessler raised an eyebrow. "What's Sunday?" "Our church holds its monthly community gathering. My father's a deacon. He never misses it." Okay, I need to pause here for a second. If you're watching this and thinking, "I know exactly how this feels," or if you're sitting there wondering, "What is she going to do on Sunday?" drop a comment right now. Tell me, should she confront him publicly or handle it privately? I genuinely want to know what you'd do. Now, back to the story. 5 days after I woke up, they discharged me. I was still sore, still slow, still bruised in places I couldn't see. But I could walk, I could think, and I could make decisions, which was all that mattered. My father arrived at 10 in the morning to pick me up. He'd brought a suitcase. "You're staying with us until you recover," he said. He didn't ask. He announced it. The way he announced everything. No arguments. "That's kind of you, Dad, but Deborah's picking me up. She has a spare room." His face changed. Not dramatically. Gerald Thomas never let the mask slip far, but the corners of his mouth tightened. "You'd rather stay with a stranger than your own family?" "She's not a stranger. She's been my emergency contact for 3 years. Something moved behind his eyes. A calculation. But it didn't land. He didn't connect it to the proxy. Not yet. "Fine," he said. He picked up the suitcase he'd brought and walked out without saying goodbye. That evening, Meredith texted, "Dad's upset. You're being ungrateful, after everything he's been through." I read it. I set my phone down. I didn't respond. At Deborah's apartment, I sat at her kitchen table and called Kessler. We went over the timeline. He confirmed the filings. Court motion to void the fraudulent deed, police report for forgery, notification to the mortgage lender about the disputed title, everything ready, everything in order. "Sunday," I said. "Sunday," he agreed. That night, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to hear it. "By the way," he said, his tone casual, almost rehearsed. "Grandma Lillian's house. I've been handling the estate stuff. Don't worry about it. I'll explain when you're feeling better." He was testing me, checking the perimeter, seeing if I knew. "Okay, Dad," I said. "Thanks for taking care of it." I hung up, set the phone face down on the table. Deborah was watching me from the kitchen doorway. "How do you do that?" she asked. "How do you sound so calm?" "Practice," I said. 29 years of practice. Let me tell you about my father's church. First Grace Community Church sits on a tree-lined road in a suburb west of Philadelphia. White steeple, red brick, parking lot that fills up every Sunday by 9:45. About 120 people attend weekly. Families, retirees, small business owners, teachers. The kind of congregation where everyone knows your name, your kids' names, and what you brought to the last potluck. Gerald Thomas had been a deacon there for 15 years. He ushered at the door. He read scripture from the lectern. He organized the men's breakfast. He shook every hand in the room after the service, looked people in the eye, asked about their kids. When the church needed a new roof, Gerald led the fundraising campaign. When someone's furnace broke in January, Gerald fixed it for free and wouldn't take $1. Pastor David mentioned him in sermons. A man of faith and sacrifice. That was the phrase. I'd heard it so many times I could feel it in my teeth. Every first Sunday of the month, the church held a community potluck gathering in the fellowship hall. Folding tables, casserole dishes, paper plates, a standing microphone near the front where people shared blessings and prayer requests. Gerald always spoke. He always talked about gratitude, about family, about what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. 120 people believed every word. This coming Sunday was the first Sunday of the month. I called Kessler on Saturday evening. "Can you be there at noon?" "I'll be there at 11:30. I hung up and sat on Deborah's couch. My ribs still ached when I breathed too deeply. The bruises on my forearms had faded from purple to yellow. I could walk without wincing now, slowly but upright. I wasn't planning a scene. I was planning a conversation, but when 120 people are in the room, every conversation becomes a stage. Sunday morning, 7 a.m. I woke up before the alarm. I stood in front of Deborah's bathroom mirror and looked at myself. The bruise along my jawline was almost gone. The one under my left eye had turned a faint green. My collarbone was still sore when I lifted my arm too high. I looked like someone who'd been hit by a truck, because I had been. I put on a white button-down shirt and black slacks. Simple, clean, no jewelry except the small silver studs Lillian had given me on my 21st birthday. I pulled my hair back, washed my face, didn't bother with makeup. I picked up the manila folder from the kitchen table. Inside, copies of Lillian's will, the original deed in my name, the county's lien records showing my father's mortgage, and the redacted incident report Pat had provided, the one with my father's words printed in black ink on hospital letterhead. I slid the folder into my bag. Deborah drove. We didn't say much. She turned onto the church road at 11:20 and parked near the back of the lot. The steeple caught the sun. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "I've never been more sure." She squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens in there, I'll be right outside." I nodded. I opened the car door. Kessler was already there. I spotted him near the entrance. Gray suit, leather briefcase, standing by the flagpole with the patience of a man who billed by the hour and had nowhere else to be. He saw me. He gave a single nod. I walked through the front doors. The service was already underway. Hymns, warm air, the smell of old carpet and coffee. I slipped into the last pew and sat down. My father was in the front row. He turned at the sound of the door, saw me. His face lit up. The proud father, the grateful deacon, the man of faith and sacrifice. He raised his hand and waved. I waved back. A small wave. A patient wave. Meredith sat beside him. She glanced at me. She didn't wave. The service ended at noon. The congregation filed into the fellowship hall, a wide, low-ceilinged room with fluorescent lights and folding tables arranged in rows, foil pans of baked ziti and green bean casserole, paper plates stacked beside a tower of napkins, the standing microphone near the front, plugged into a small speaker that hummed quietly. Gerald was already up there. He always was. He stood beside the microphone with his hands clasped in front of him, waiting for the room to settle. 120 people found their seats. Chairs scraped against linoleum. Children darted between tables. He tapped the mic. "Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with something personal today." The room quieted. "As many of you know, my youngest daughter Wendy was in a serious car accident last month. She was in a coma for 3 weeks. The doctors weren't sure she'd make it." He paused. He was good at pauses. "But God is faithful. And today, Wendy is here with us." He turned and gestured toward me. I was standing near the back wall. Every head in the room turned. Applause. Warm, genuine applause. A woman in the second row pressed her hand to her heart. An elderly man nodded. "As a father," Gerald continued, his voice cracking at exactly the right moment, "there is nothing more terrifying than almost losing your child. I prayed every single night. I never left her side." I felt the words land in my chest. Not like a wound, like a key turning in a lock. I never left her side. He said that to 120 people who had no reason to doubt him. "Family is everything," he said. "That's what I've always taught my girls." He looked at me. He smiled. He opened his arms, just slightly, the universal gesture of a father expecting an embrace. I smiled back. I walked toward him. The room watched with soft, expectant eyes. "Dad," I said, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "can I say a few words?" He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Not in front of 120 people who had just heard him call me his miracle. "Of course, sweetheart." He handed me the microphone. His smile was wide, confident. He stepped to the side, hands behind his back, playing the supporting role perfectly. I wrapped my fingers around the mic. It was warm from his grip. I didn't look at him. I looked at the room. "Thank you all for your prayers. I'm truly grateful to be standing here. But I need to correct something my father just said." The room was still. Gerald's smile faded by 1 degree. My father didn't pray by my bedside. He was at the hospital once, the night of the accident. He didn't come to check on me. He went to the billing department first. Then he spoke to my surgeon. I could feel Gerald shifting beside me. I didn't turn. He asked how much the surgery would cost, and when they told him, he said, and these are his exact words, documented in a hospital incident report, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life." Silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Then he signed a Do Not Resuscitate order. Someone in the middle of the room inhaled sharply. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. I'm alive because a colleague, a nurse at that hospital, found my healthcare proxy and called my friend in the middle of the night. My friend drove 90 minutes in the rain to authorize the surgery. Not my father, not my sister, a friend. Gerald stepped forward. Wendy, stop. You don't know what you're... I'm not done, Dad. This isn't the place. You chose a church to lie. I'm choosing the same church for the truth. You're confused. The medication I have the hospital records right here. The room didn't move. Nobody reached for their water. Nobody checked their phone. 120 people were holding their breath. Gerald stopped talking. The side door of the fellowship hall opened. Donald Kessler walked in. Gray suit, leather briefcase, unhurried. He didn't look around the room for a seat. He walked directly to the front, set his briefcase on the nearest folding table, and stood beside me with the quiet authority of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. My father saw him. And for the first time in my life, the first time I can ever remember, I watched Gerald Thomas look genuinely afraid. Not angry, not offended, afraid. "This is Mr. Donald Kessler," I said into the microphone. He was my grandmother Lillian's attorney. A murmur passed through the room. Lillian's name still meant something here. She'd attended this church for 30 years. My grandmother left me her house and her savings in a will, notarized, probated by the court 5 months ago. I paused to let that settle. My father knew nothing about it, because my grandmother didn't trust him with it. Gerald opened his mouth, closed it. "While I was in a coma," I continued, "my father forged my signature on a power of attorney. He transferred the house into his name, and he took out a $280,000 mortgage against it." I heard a gasp. Then a dish hit the floor somewhere near the back tables. Someone's hand had gone slack. A fork clattered on linoleum. Gerald's voice came out louder now, strained. "That's a lie. Eleanor left that house to the family, not just you." Kessler opened his briefcase. He lifted a single document, the original will, and held it so the people in the front rows could see the notary seal. "I have the original will right here, Mr. Thomas." His voice was even, almost gentle. "Solely to Wendy Marie Thomas. Your name does not appear anywhere in this document." Gerald looked at Meredith. Meredith was staring at the floor. I lowered the microphone for a moment and spoke directly to my father, not whispering, not shouting, just speaking. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Dad. I'm here because you tried to let me die. And when that didn't work, you robbed me. I know. This is a lot. If this story is hitting you hard, you're not alone. Thousands of people have commented on stories like this one. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how this ends. And tell me in the comments, what would you have said to Gerald right there in front of everyone? Okay, let's keep going." Gerald turned to the room. His jaw was set. His eyes were scanning, looking for an ally, a friendly face, anyone who might still be on his side. "She's on heavy medication," he said. His voice was tight but controlled. "She doesn't know what she's saying. This is a private family matter." Nobody answered. The room was a wall of folded arms and unblinking eyes. Then a voice from the back row, a man I didn't recognize. "Then why is there a lawyer here, Gerald?" Gerald didn't answer. His eyes moved to Pastor David, who stood near the coffee table with his hands in his pockets. "Gerald," the pastor said quietly, "I think we should all hear this out." Gerald shifted. He changed tactics, the way he always did when authority failed. He softened, dropped his shoulders, let his voice break. I've sacrificed everything for this family. Wendy's medical bills nearly bankrupted us when she was a child. I did what I thought was best. I didn't raise the microphone. I just spoke from where I stood, clearly, the way you speak to a patient who's avoiding the truth. You did what was cheapest, Dad. There's a difference. You have no idea the pressure I've been under, the debts, the... He stopped. He realized what he'd almost said. His mouth closed like a door. Meredith stood up from her chair. Her face was white. Dad, stop talking. Gerald grabbed her arm. Tell them, Meredith. Tell them I was trying to protect the family. Meredith pulled free. She looked at me, then at the floor, then at the exit. I can't do this, she said. She walked toward the door, and as she passed me, close enough that only I could hear, she whispered 6 words that I'll carry for the rest of my life. I should have called Deborah myself. Then she was gone. I watched the door close behind my sister. The room was still watching me. I turned back to the congregation. I'm not telling you this to destroy my father. I'm telling you this because for 15 years, he has stood at this microphone and told you who he is. I think you deserve to know the truth. Then I turned to Gerald. He was standing with his back almost against the wall now. His hands were at his sides. The confident deacon who'd opened this gathering was gone. In his place was a man who looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Dad, here's what's going to happen. My voice was steady. I didn't need the microphone for this part. The room was silent enough to hear a page turn. Mr. Kessler filed a motion with the county court yesterday to void the deed transfer because it's based on a forged power of attorney that I never signed. Gerald's jaw tightened. The bank that issued the mortgage has been notified that the title is disputed. The loan is frozen. His left hand began to tremble. I filed a police report on Friday. Forgery and fraud. The notary who stamped your document is named in it too. He took a half step backward. You will be required to return the full $280,000, or you will face criminal charges. Gerald's voice came out raw, almost a whisper. You'd send your own father to jail? I looked at him. Straight on. No flinch. You signed a paper to let your own daughter die. The fellowship hall held its breath. A child somewhere near the back asked their mother a question and was quickly shushed. I'm not sending you anywhere, Dad. I'm giving you a chance to make it right. That's more than you gave me. Kessler closed his briefcase with a soft click. The filings are already with the court, Mr. Thomas. This isn't a negotiation. Gerald looked around the room one last time. I watched him do it. The slow rotation, face by face. These were people he'd known for years. Jim Callahan, whose pipes he'd fixed every winter. Susan Merritt, who brought him coffee after every sermon. Robert Dill, the other deacon, who had stood beside him at every fundraiser for a decade. They all looked back at him. None of them looked away, and none of them moved toward him. Gerald sat down, not in a chair, on the nearest folding table. He put his face in his hands. Robert walked over. He put a hand on Gerald's shoulder, firm, not tender. Gerald, I think you should leave. Gerald stood. He walked toward the door. His shoes made no sound on the linoleum. At the threshold, he turned and looked at me. His eyes were red. His mouth was open, like he wanted to say something, some final line that would land the way his speeches always landed. Nothing came out. He left. I set the microphone down on the nearest table. My hands were steady. My ribs hurt. I didn't care. I'm sorry for disrupting your Sunday, I said to the room. My grandmother Lillian loved this church. She would have wanted the truth spoken here. 2 women came forward and hugged me. A man I didn't know shook my hand without a word. Pat, who had arrived quietly before the service and had been standing near the coffee station the entire time, caught my eye from across the room and gave a single, firm nod. Then someone touched my arm, a small, weathered hand. I turned. An older woman, white hair, cardigan, glasses on a chain around her neck. I'm Doris Brennan, she said. Your grandmother and I sat together every Sunday for 20 years. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. She told me about you, every single week. She was so proud of you, Wendy. She never stopped talking about you. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was invisible in this place, that nobody in my father's world had ever seen me. Lillian made sure that wasn't true. Within 24 hours, everything Gerald Thomas had built came apart. The bank froze the mortgage Monday morning. An attorney from the lender's fraud department called Kessler before noon. The title was flagged as disputed, the loan suspended. Gerald couldn't access the funds. He couldn't refinance. He couldn't sell. The $280,000 he'd already spent was gone, and the debt was now his alone, secured against nothing. The county court accepted Kessler's motion to void the deed transfer. Gerald was served with a summons at his home that afternoon. A process server knocked on his door at 3:15. His neighbor was getting the mail and watched the whole thing. The police opened a formal investigation into the forgery and fraud. The notary, Carl, was named in the report. By Tuesday, Carl had hired his own attorney and was cooperating with investigators. Gerald was on his own. Word traveled through the church faster than any sermon ever had. Gerald was asked to step down as deacon by a unanimous vote of the board Tuesday evening. Robert Dill called him personally. Gerald didn't argue. He didn't show up to the meeting. His plumbing clients started canceling. 3 on Monday, 5 more by Wednesday. Most of them were church members. One of them, Jim Callahan, texted him a single sentence: "Don't come to my house again." Gerald called me at 10 that night. I answered. "You destroyed me," he said. His voice was flat, emptied out. "No, Dad. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He hung up. He called Meredith next. She didn't pick up. One more thing surfaced that week. Kessler found it during a routine check of my records. 3 years earlier, Gerald had changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. From Deborah to himself. My signature was on the form. I never signed it. He had a plan for every version of my death, and none of them included saving me. Meredith called 3 days later. I was sitting on Deborah's couch, a heating pad across my ribs, a cup of tea going cold on the table. My phone buzzed, her name on the screen. I stared at it for 2 full rings before I picked up. "Wendy," her voice was thick. She'd been crying. "I need to say something." "Then say it." "I knew about the DNR. I was in the waiting room when Dad went to talk to the doctor. He told me what he was going to do. I didn't stop him." I said nothing. I let the silence do what silence does. "And the house. I knew about that too. He promised me $85,000 if I kept quiet." "And you kept quiet?" "Yes. While I was in a coma." "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I was scared of him, Wendy. I've always been scared of him. I know that's not an excuse." "It's not." She was crying now, hard, the way she used to cry when we were children, messy, loud, uncontrolled. I remembered that sound. It used to make me want to fix things for her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I know I don't deserve it." "You're right, you don't. Not right now." A long pause. I could hear her breathing. Ragged, thin. "But I'm not going to pretend you don't exist, Meredith. If you want to rebuild something, with me, not with Dad's money, you know where to find me." She didn't say anything for a while. Then quietly, "Grandma Lillian sent me a letter too." I sat up. She wrote, "I love you, Meredith, but you are too much like your father. Choose differently." The line went silent. "Did you?" I asked. "Choose differently?" She didn't answer, because we both already knew. Forgiveness isn't something I owe anyone. But the door isn't locked, it's just closed. She'll have to knock. 1 month later, the deed to Lillian's house was back in my name. The court voided the transfer on a Wednesday. Kessler called me at 10 in the morning with the ruling. I thanked him. He said, "Thank your grandmother." Then he paused and added, "She would have loved watching you in that fellowship hall." Gerald faced criminal charges, forgery in the 3rd degree, fraud, mortgage fraud. His attorney advised a plea deal, probation, full restitution, no prison time if he cooperated. Gerald accepted. He didn't have a choice. The evidence was overwhelming, and Carl the notary had already told investigators everything. Gerald sold his house to cover the debt. It wasn't enough. The remaining balance would follow him for years. He moved in with his brother in Allentown. I heard this through Meredith, who heard it from a cousin. I didn't verify it. I didn't need to. Meredith lost 2 real estate listings from church members. She didn't lose her license. She wasn't charged. She hadn't signed any documents. But people remembered. People always remember. I went back to work, part-time at first. Pat rearranged the schedule so I'd only do day shifts for the first 2 months. She didn't make a big deal about it. She just handed me the new rotation and said, "Welcome back, Thomas." On a Saturday in late October, I drove to Norristown. I parked on Elm Street. I walked up to the brick house with the creaking porch swing and the garden that had gone a little wild. I turned the key in the front door, my key, in my door, and stepped inside. Lavender. That's what I smelled first. Lillian's lavender sachets, tucked into every drawer and closet. The scent of a woman who'd planned for everything. Her photo sat on the mantel. The 2 of us on the porch swing, squinting into the sun. I don't remember who took it. I sat in her rocking chair. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just sat. For the first time, I was in a house that was mine. Not because I'd earned anyone's approval, but because someone had loved me enough to make sure I'd be okay. I used to believe that being a good daughter meant absorbing whatever my family threw at me. Every insult, every guilt trip, every time my father reminded me what I'd cost him, I took it all in and said thank you because I thought that's what love required. Silence, gratitude, obedience. I was wrong. Setting a boundary isn't revenge, it's survival. And sometimes, survival looks like a quiet man in a gray suit, a stack of notarized papers, and the courage to stand in front of 120 people and say, "This is what actually happened. I don't hate my father. Hating him would mean he still controls how I feel. He doesn't. Not anymore. He is a man who made terrible choices driven by debts he was too proud to admit and an addiction he was too ashamed to face. That doesn't excuse what he did. But it does explain why I don't need to carry his weight on my shoulders any longer. If you're watching this and you see yourself anywhere in my story, in the guilt, in the silence, in the bone-deep belief that you owe people who have hurt you, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't. You don't owe anyone your health. You don't owe anyone your home. And you certainly don't owe anyone your life. My grandmother Lillian taught me that. Not with lectures, not with shouting. With a letter, a house, and a lawyer named Kessler. I still go to church, by the way. Different church, same God, smaller congregation, friendlier coffee, and I sit in the front row. Not because I need to be seen, because I'm done hiding in the back. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If Wendy's story resonated with you, or reminded you of someone you love, leave a comment below. Tell me, what boundary have you set that changed your life? I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. There's one waiting for you that I think you'll connect with even more. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.